There's a lot to be said about great content. Think about the last movie you watched, or think about the last podcast that you listened to. If you watched or listened from start to finish, you were sucked in, you were engaged, you wanted to hear everything that everyone had to say. You wanted to see how that story unfolded. You wanted to see the hero's journey and follow them from bottom to top and see how everything came out in the end. And hopefully it was a feel good ending. And it was something that made you say, I hope they do a sequel, or I can't wait to tune into next week's episode. Great content has a way of doing that. But it's important that you look at this on numerous levels, because great content, while it is a key component of making a great podcast or making great material that you put out into the world in general, there's a lot more behind it. And we want to make sure that all of the ducks are in a row. So when you put good content into the world, you ultimately satiate a specific need that they have in their life, and you get them locked into you as a brand, as a company, as a person who is a resource to help them solve problems. Great content will help do that, but we have to have all the other pieces in place first. So let's talk a little bit today about why great podcast content isn't enough. Hello, my name is Jason Sircone, and you have found episode 110 of Podcasting Strategy Simplified. So if you've listened to the last few episodes, the party analogy has come up, because I've always looked at podcasting as a party, and there's a lot of similarities to building up to a party. And then once you get them in the door, you give them a great time with your content. That's all a part of it. But again, you do have to go through that process of getting people to come to your party. And I want to use that analogy today, but also I want to tap into the movie analogy as well, because I think there's a lot of things to understand about what makes a great movie. So on the surface, you think about it from our end of things, typically what we're most focused on when we see a movie, whether we go to the theater or it's something we watch at home, we just want to see that story. We want to understand what the problem is. What are they going to do to solve it? How are they going to solve it? And then what's the conclusion? Who wins at the end, right? That's what we're following. And a lot of times we think, well, that's where it begins and ends for us. But when you really dig into it, there's a lot more to it. First of all, somebody had to put that story in front of you. Somebody had to make you aware that it existed. There was promotion behind it. So maybe you saw a trailer on a previous movie that you consumed. Maybe you saw a commercial. Maybe you saw an ad pop up. Maybe there was something on Facebook or Instagram, something that made you aware that that movie existed. So these movie runners, they're not just focusing on putting this great 2-hour story in front of you. They are focused on this entire experience. So that initial awareness also features a little bit of grabbiness to it, because they know they've got a very minute period of time to grab your attention. So they have to put serious thought into what's going to make you get intrigued to say, ooh, this looks really good. I need to see this entire movie. So they're usually putting their best foot forward. And in a lot of ways, the trailer or those previews, they become just as important as the movie. They're done in a cinematic way, and it really just abbreviates the whole story into enough for you to say, yes, I need to see this. So there's that part of it. Now take that and run it parallel to podcasting. That's where a lot of your promotion comes into play. You've got a new episode out there. How are you going to promote it? How are you going to let people know that it exists? Now, your loyal audience, they are aware they're going to be there. They come every week, right? But you want new people to hear that content as well. So you've got to do your promotion, whether you're using social media, ads, an email newsletter, your website, blogs. There's a number of things that you can do, but it's not just about the content at that point, right? You have the content in place. You want people to hear it. You want people to experience it. So now you have to do more. You have to promote. You have to get the message out there. So how do you do that? Again, there's a number of things that you can do, but you have to find the one that works best for you. So maybe that's social media. Maybe you have a good following on social media. Right now, the buzz is newsletters. We talked about this on episode 95 with Ariel Nizenblatt. Newsletters are a huge promotional piece in podcasting. And it's not just to say, hey, new episode out this week. It's to run content that is adjacent to what's going on your podcast, but also gives your viewers and listeners more insight into the content that you are creating. Now, let's take this another layer deeper. Think about the actors and the directors and the promoters behind a movie when it comes out. They're not just putting this movie out there and then sitting on their hands. They're doing the talk show circuit. They're doing interviews on podcasts. They're doing their own social media. They're doing a ton of red carpet premiere activities, just things that, again, raise awareness. They're doing their part to make people know that this movie is the shit and you need to see it. You need to be watching it. For whatever reason, as I was just saying that, all I can think about was Cobra Kai. And I don't know why that was what popped in my head. I know that's not a movie, but that was a TV show that I was big into when it was on Netflix. And I still will go back and rewatch it because it's there and it was awesome. But I think about all the things that I kept seeing, all of those actors doing, from different videos on Netflix to, again, their own promotion and interviews and things that they're out there letting people know what was going on with the series. And that's what you need to do with your podcast as well. So how do you do that? Well, again, you have the social media angle where you can talk about it, but maybe you need to be going on other shows as a guest. Maybe you need to be out there with your voice talking about not just your podcast, but the subject matter in which you are an expert on. And more than likely, there are a number of shows in your niche that you can hook up with and make a guest appearance, not to sell, not to shill, not to say, listen to my podcast for half an hour, but to deliver real value and to position yourself as the shit, to position yourself as the resource that people need. The more that you put yourself out there, the more likely people are saying, damn, this person knows what they're talking about. And just in listening to them on this podcast that I listen to every week, I feel like I've moved the needle slightly. I've taken a shift of 1% in the right direction. If you make that happen, you've won. You've done your job. And when you do that, people are going to say, what else does this person have for me? They've got their own podcast. They plugged it at the end. Their call to action was to come listen to the podcast. They plugged episode 43 because it was very, very on point with everything they talked about in that episode I just listened to. Yep, I'm going there next. So now you've got a new listener in your ecosystem. If you set all of these pieces in play the right way, you are going to take them on this journey as that now that they're in your ecosystem, they start listening to your podcast. They've already started that journey of building trust in you. And as you continue to develop that trust, now the big things can start happening. You want them as a customer just as much as you want them as a listener, right? Well, your content is going to help them understand why they should be your customer. That's where the great content comes into play. It's a big part, but it's not the only part. Because as I've just illustrated, you need to get them in the door. So as I was saying before, that party analogy, you think about the party that you go to, or any party that you go to, I should say, and it's not just that you randomly just snapped your fingers and you're at a party. You heard about that party from somebody. You were invited to that party, whether it was with an official written invitation or somebody just said, hey, we're having some people over tonight. Why don't you stop by? So now you know, okay, this is happening. I know if I go there, I'm more than likely going to have a good time. What's it going to take to get me in the door? How do I get to that point? So all of the promotion that goes up to getting people to listen to your podcast, it's all a mission to get them in the door so they can experience the great content. The podcast SEO element here is huge because that is like the invitation and the journey to the door. So having a great podcast name, having something that is very on the nose and direct, like Podcasting Strategy Simplified. Each and every week, I'm coming to you with episodes about podcasting strategy. You know, when you click play, you are going to get elements of podcasting strategy that are going to help you leverage podcasting for your business. That's why I'm here. That's the party I'm throwing. Welcome. The keg is in the kitchen. So great name, good looking cover art, not something that is whipped together that looks like it was drawn out in crayon. You want to have a good podcast description that succinctly explains what your show is all about. You have some keywords in there as well. and it allows people to understand before they've ever clicked play what the show is about. So think of that, like I said, the invitation. This is the path. Now you've got them to the door. When do they walk through? When they press play. Now, this is where the great content comes into play. If you have good content, people are going to stay for the whole party, and then they're going to come to your next party. You know, a lot of times I've had these conversations, and sometimes it's hard. Sometimes people think that they are entitled to have everybody at their party. And then when everyone doesn't show up to their party, they wonder, what the hell? Why doesn't anybody want to come to my party? Or they get a lot of people to come to the first party, but then they don't come back for the next party. And the reason is that that content just didn't deliver. And I know it's hard to take a look at your content and say, man, maybe I'm just not delivering on what I should be delivering on. And sometimes this takes an extra set of eyes. Sometimes you need someone else to look at your content and give you honest feedback, and then you don't get butthurt over it. In the creative process that we are existing in, you have to be able to take constructive criticism. It's the only way you're going to improve. I take it all the time. I try to get it as much as possible. I like when people tell me that I'm doing something wrong, because sometimes I may not even realize it myself. So that allows me to make improvements where I need to. And in a lot of cases, sometimes that content is the reason why. So you've done all of these great things to get people in the door, but now that they're in the door, they're not having a good time. And now they're saying, I think I made the wrong decision. I'm going to go down the street to that party. This other party looks way better. And that's when they start listening to another podcast. So how do you ensure that you're setting this up the right way? This is when I say you go back to the beginning and you evaluate what your goals are for your business, and then start building podcast content to serve those goals and to accomplish those goals. Not the other way around, because that's where things can get convoluted. If you're just trying to create content and put podcasts out there so people say, oh my gosh, they put an episode out every week, they're consistent. Yeah, you might be consistent, but you might not be consistently good. And you may not be consistently delivering what people need and what people want. And if you don't have a clear understanding of who you're talking to in the beginning, it becomes increasingly difficult to create content that's going to work in that fashion. So it's vital that in the strategy that you build in the very beginning, you evaluate what your goals are in your business. And this is going to be different for everybody. I could sit here and rattle off 100 different goals. It's going to be different for every single person that is tuning into this show. You're evaluating what your goals are, and then you're saying, what can I do to use podcasting that would help me create content to accomplish that goal? And now you can start to build out the episodes that say, yep, this is going to serve this purpose. I can use content from this in an ad campaign. I could put together 3 or 4 emails for the week from this episode. You're using your content wisely. It's taking it to a new level. It's reverse engineering the typical process of, we're going to start a podcast, and the bigger our audience gets, the more leads we'll generate, and then we'll start to get more business. I would rather you say, I want this for my business. What type of content is going to get me there? And now I can start putting that in place. So again, it's more about the strategy, not just about the content. And if you build the strategy right, the great content is going to fall into place. Now, another important thing to keep in mind, and this sometimes it gets overlooked and sometimes ignored, and it just doesn't get enough press and enough talking time. And I feel like maybe I should be saying this every week because it's incredibly important to understand. You're not a full-time podcaster. You're not a full-time radio personality, or maybe, you probably weren't in the past, right? Like, that wasn't the path you took. So don't expect to be the world's best podcaster from your very first episode. This is a skill set that is developed through repetition. And the more you start to turn on this microphone, turn on the camera, understand your message, and then deliver it in a clear, concise fashion, the better you're going to get at doing that each and every time you sit down to record. It starts to come together over time. I will tell you, across the board, I have never not experienced this, even in my own podcasting. You are listening to this week's episode of Podcasting Strategy Simplified. This is episode 110. Go back to episode 1 after you listen to this. You're going to hear a major difference. Now, that was an interview, so I'm obviously not speaking to you one-on-one, but you're going to hear a major difference in my voice. I'll even say if you go back to episode 74, when I did the official rebrand of Podcasting Strategy Simplified, you're going to see a difference there too. When you sit in this seat, the more reps you put in, the more comfortable you get with your delivery, and you start to find new ways to do it. That will lead to great content. But the very first episode you put out might not be great. It might be good, and most importantly, the thing to focus on is just delivering your message. Don't get wrapped up in timestamps. Don't think you have to go for a certain period of time or else it will suck. Don't think that going too long is something you should do. Like, it's just, we put too many obstacles in front of ourselves. Like I said, trying to get so much out that we ramble for no reason, or thinking that we have to go for an hour for whatever. I mean, it's nuts what we will do to our own psyche to not make us make that great content. In the very beginning, what's important is understanding your message and what you want to accomplish, knowing your goals, and then speaking to those goals. Create your content that way and put in the reps. Get better at what you're doing, so the more you create content, the better it's going to be. Try this test. You could do it with my show, like I said, but listen to any podcast's most recent episode and then go back to the first episode that podcaster did, and you're going to experience marked improvement across the board. The more reps you put in, the more clarity you have on how you're going to deliver your message and what's going to build the great content that keeps the asses in the seats. So understanding all of this, to really put a bow on this entire message, a lot of the things I talked about today are the things that surround the content, but they ultimately fuel the great content. So all of these pieces are important. It's not just about great content. It's about understanding your goals. It's about understanding how you're going to build your content for each episode. It's understanding how that content is going to serve specific needs that you have to grow your business. It's understanding how you're going to forge solid relationships with that one target listener that makes them turn to other people in their circle and recommend you. These are all key components to making a great podcast. And these are all things that we build in the initial strategy that I help my clients build from the very beginning. So you understand how all of these pieces work, and you can avoid the landmines. And you don't have to go down this path without a GPS and hope that you get to the goal that you're looking to reach with no guidance, with no leader. That's hard, man. That's hard to do, because there's so many moving parts. And coming into this brand new, it's virtually impossible to understand what all those moving parts are if you've never done this before. If you've never leveraged podcasting as a tool to build your business, there are going to be things that you miss that you just don't realize are there. If you don't work with someone who's done it before, you don't know what you don't know. And I'm not saying I know everything, but I've done enough over the past 11 years to say I've stepped on some of those landmines, and I can help you avoid them because I know they exist. And understanding what that means for you is really what's going to make podcasting click for your business. So to wrap this up, great podcast content is huge. It's going to help get your message delivered. It's going to amplify it. It's going to bring more people into your ecosystem. It's going to help you build trust. It's going to help people engage with your brand. It's going to help people realize that you are the shit. You are the resource. You are the brand, the business, the company, the personal brand, the solopreneur, the one that's going to help move a person from A to B. That's what your podcast content can do. But it's important to understand it's not just about the content. It's all of the pieces around it that make your podcast a machine that drives your business forward. If you really want to tap into this, I suggest setting up a free strategy call with me. We're going to determine where the gaps are in your business and how podcasting can fill them. Go to jasonsircone.com/strategy call and set that call up today. And with that, we're going to bring the curtain down on episode 110 of Podcasting Strategy Simplified. I hope you had a great time. I know I did. Until our paths cross again on the next episode, my name is Jason Sircone, reminding you that podcasting isn't easy, but it doesn't need to be complicated. I'll see you next time.